Her clinical experience includes, thank you, Nakia, being a dually certified speech-language pathologist and board-certified behavior analyst. She is the CEO of Excel Prep Schools and The Huddle. And Landria has been a speaker for over 15 years, delivering messages and high-impact trainings. While her research interests align with personnel and professional training and social communication skills, her joy comes when delivering messages of equity, diversity, justice, belonging, and wellness to corporate and education organizations. Landria is a self-described visionary, crafter, and entrepreneur. She has consulted and supported clinical practice process improvement and completed the merger and acquisition of her own multi-specialty clinical practice. Landria completed her undergraduate studies at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and graduate coursework in speech-language pathology at Northwestern University. She's currently completing her PhD in special education and is a full-time wife, mother, daughter, sister, friend, business owner, and student. Landria is from the South Side of Chicago, lived in Connecticut and Michigan for a number of years, and now resides in Illinois with her husband, Alfred, and their children, Adam and Allison. They also have a dog, Asher. So thank you so much, Landria. I will pass it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here and appreciate the ask. This topic is near and dear to me, and hopefully through this conversation, I hope that we have, that there will be I could be speaking to the choir, as they say, right? But I hope that there is a good level of dialogue for us to reimagine social skills intervention. So I'll start with the question. I always try to figure out how to begin, and I'll just give a summary of playing a game with a couple of kids over the summer. And we were sitting down and playing a card game. We were playing Uno. And it mattered less the skill set of the people who were playing Uno. And so you may ask, well, you want to be able to play Uno well, and why did the skill set of actual completing the game and winning, why did that matter less? Because we were focusing on the ability to talk and play Uno, the ability to talk smack, if you will, while Uno was being played. Because what is Uno really? In its most simplest form, it is matching to sample. It is color match, number match, and then they throw in a couple cards that kind of serve as an SD to tell you what to do. Change the color, draw 4, draw 2, reverse. And in the game of Uno, you don't have to be an expert player. What you really need to do is be a person who can stay in the game. Because people around you will tell you, look in your hand and find the color. Look in your hand and find a matching number. They will help you play the game well so that they can have their next turn. But the real goodness of Uno is being with other people and having the ability to talk smack, to talk while you're playing Uno. And not just say your turn, my turn, but really comment about how other people are doing. Oh, you suck. That's something that kids would say while they're playing Uno. Or they would say things like, hurry up, we're always waiting on you. That's something that people would say while they're playing Uno. So there's a lot of declarative language that comments about how we see another person's skill level, how we see another person's ability to play the game. And so their ability to play the game, but to enjoy the fun and the camaraderie of playing the game. Playing Uno is not about the completion of, but the participation with other people. And the skill set that we really need in playing Uno is the ability to have small talk, talk smack, and have declarative language. And so I thought to frame our social skills and the concept of equity within a social skills intervention and its groups with how well are we preparing our learners, our clients, children and youth and teens to be able to participate in these groups in an equitable fashion? How skilled up are we? What kind of skills are we really providing them? So I want to frame this with, I think everyone starts off with good intention. I think we are people who participate and provide services with a level of great intention, and we end and we graduate, if you will, people and we have good intention from beginning throughout the end. But why do we need to focus in on social skills? Well, social skills is the space where we put it all together. The academic conversation is the ability to talk about shapes, the ability to talk about numbers, the ability to talk about states and geography and maps of the world. Those are academic based conversation, but it is a social skill to be able to participate in that Q&A or that statement to statement conversation and remain topic centered. Studies have shown that children or youth or people who are in academic contexts are those conversations with people who have diagnoses such as autism they're better able to stay topic centered in academic based statements, and they're able to demonstrate and create good relationships when those social groups are academically based in terms of their topics. But it is an integration of language, of verbal reciprocity, of rhythm, of the ability to take turns and to be a good comprehender of language, a good deliverer of one step, two step, or more directions, and provide information to other people. It is the goodness of what we do. It is the observable proof of our work. Social skills are, no matter the conversation, no matter the context, if the learner can exhibit these skills socially and have generative learning, not just generalization, but generate new learning in other contexts with other people um, across varying topics, then that is the observable proof of work. Social skills would say, or the integration of language and all of those core skills would say that we cannot teach all of the words. We cannot teach all of the kinds of statements that a learner should make. We can't teach we can't teach all of the idioms or the slang or the what's popular in terms of the language use of people, but we can give them the ability to tune in and know what to tune into and be able to participate and listen. And so those are core skills that social skills integration and our splinter toolkit, if you will, the tool skills that we teach are able to uh, develop in learners. And then there is the Belmont report. And I go back to this report, and it's part of the institutional review board. And it tasks us as people who are doing research to think about the respect for persons and the justice. Like, what's the purpose of the things that we are doing? Are they going to benefit? And this is in alignment with the seven principles of making it technological, making it when we think about the Bear article and our foundations as behavior analysts. And then there was recently the Lancet article, which was written by a few researchers who I think are more inclined to be implementation or applied researchers, and they're thinking about, is there an alignment? Is there a bridge, or is there a gap between research and intervention and policy and people and who's benefiting from the work that we do anyway. And so the Lancet article really positioned in the 2020s, if you will. It is the most recent article that really tasks us to think about how we are aligning research policy and practice. And so social skills are important. And for me, my positionality is if I can't see it socially and it's not observable, the impact, then I may need to go back and retool myself, and therefore the learner that we're working with benefits. So our objectives today are to think about and explore how we are preparing and what the personnel preparation, the professional training, what that looks like when we think about speech pathologists and behavior analysts with regard to social skills intervention practices, and not having a distal relationship with DEI and diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, so DEIJ. I think there's another now acronym, but what's the cultural responsibility and equity that we should have with regard to social skills intervention? So let's operationalize friendship. And I say this because I'm just on the heels of finishing up a research study, and I asked a few BCBAs and practitioners in the field, what's the purpose of social skills groups? Like, why do we do them? What's the point? And what are the outcomes of it? And there are all so many different answers. And what is friendship really? And so here's a snapshot of how friendship has been operationalized in speech pathology articles, education research, and applied behavior analysis. Some people say it's transactional. It can be transactional or relational. So transaction is your turn, my turn. Your turn, my turn. Relational is, oh, hurry up. There's more excitement. There's more emotional undertones in the language between the two people. And you're really contextualizing inside of Uno or some type of game. You're adding more context that includes the person. Transaction is about the thing and the completion of the thing that we're trying to do. Relational is, yeah, we may or may not complete this, but boy, did I have fun with you. And so that's more relational. Operationalizing friendship also means that it's two or more individual, that each relationship can be unique based on the context and environment. As adults, we know that I have friends that I know from college. I have friends that I know from job A. I have friends that I know from workplace B. And then I have conference friends. Like I have these people, and sometimes my conference friends may be my work friends, but I am different in those contexts. And so there are friends that I go on vacation with and friends that I just would never go on vacation with, but they're still my friends. And so the uniqueness of friendship is different across every relationship and context. So when you take social skills intervention, I wonder if we are making room for the context and the flexibility and the environment and the uniqueness of those relationships that learners may encounter. Here's an example. Over the summer, I happened to tell a person that yelling and screaming was okay. And he says, it is not. It is not okay. I said, why? He says, because I went to a social skills group and the person told me that yelling and screaming was never okay. I'm like, well, what if we go to a game? What if we have fun? What if there's a fire? He's like, it is not okay. Like, wow, okay, well, maybe there should be some flexibility in thinking about the spaces where it can be okay. So do I want to teach the learner that hitting is wrong? And this is always controversial. Should you teach people that hitting is a bad idea? And is hitting wrong, or is it a skill that needs to be that needs some physical and emotional regulation? So teaching the learner to think is more important than teaching them not to. So do not hit. Sure, but do not hit your sibling is different. But should you hit the stranger? Should you hit the dog should you hit, if a dog, your neighbor's dog, and we have this, the neighbor's dog is barking, attacking you, should you allow the dog to just bite and attack you and don't hit because the rule is no hitting? And so there are different contexts and environments where the skills that we say don't are the skills that are necessary for their survival. And so we think about equity, and are we really setting learners up to have autonomy, to have advocacy, and are we setting them up in our social skills intervention? Are we setting them up for success? Are we making them mini versions of our adult selves? So the time frame that they talk about for operationalizing friendship is that you need a period of 6 months. That's what they say. I don't know, but that's what the research has said. You need a period of 6 months, and there are 3 dimensions. There's companionship, there's trust, affection, and closeness. So really what they're saying is that to have a friend, you need some time together. You have to be able to understand that a friend in 1st grade might not be the friend in 3rd grade. And I think oftentimes we don't necessarily set them up for the friend that you had in 1st grade is not the same friend in 3rd grade. And quite frankly, 2nd grade is when things really change. You don't get the have to invitations to the party. You get the I don't want to invite this person to the party, 2nd, 3rd grade, right? And so then your feelings are hurt because they think this is my friend. Well, there are levels to that, if you will. And so it's about wellness, it's about belonging, and it's about being able to understand the dimensions of friendship. And so there are spaces where if we go to the same school and we're in the same homeroom and we talk to one another, but if I see you at the YMCA and we're on the same swim team, I may not talk to you. And you may say, well, that's not a good friend. And that's an adult response, right? That's not a good friend to you. If that person doesn't speak to you in one context and they talk to you in another context, that's not a good friend. Sure, agreed. And kids don't often see it that way. And so adding in that level of flexibility as we operationalize what is a friend, and the core of this is being able to read the room and to be able to teach them to be able to think. And so, if I had to conceptualize friendship and social skill development, it would be actualizing relationships. Who out there looks like they could be a friend for me? And then being able to have the skill set to maintain that relationship, from being able to maintain that relationship. And then finally, adding in where is the reciprocal benefit, the reciprocal relationship. Oftentimes, the reciprocal relationship is not yet seen. I recently read an article by a researcher, and Dr. Connie Kasari out of UCLA. She does a lot of research in social skills intervention. And there are a number of articles that talk about the learner with autism and do they have the ability to understand and see friendship when it is offered. And I thought, I was offended when I read it. I really was. I was offended when I read it. And I thought, wow, how about discounting a person and deciding that they don't recognize a friend when it's offered? Being able to recognize a friend when it's offered is a skill that I think we all evolve to. And I still struggle with it as an adult. And so when we pinpoint diagnosis and the inability to recognize a friend when friendship is being offered, is that also saying that the friend who is offering friendship is perceived by the learner with autism as a good person for them? And so sometimes We may think that that peer is a good person for them. And then how did we select that peer? Why did that peer get selected? Were they good for the adult or were they good for the kid? And so when there is not reciprocity in the relationship, the sustainability of the actualizing the friendship is not going to happen. When there is not reciprocity, when there is I'm jumping ahead, but when there is a peer who is seen as a model of social skills for a person, we've discounted the person with autism, we've discounted their skills. So we've already decided who people are in the relationship. So is this peer developing a friendship or are they here to work? And oftentimes they're here to work, not necessarily develop a mutuality of benefit. And so most relationships, you think about your own friendship, most relationships are include the fact that there is mutuality of benefit. There is reciprocal relationship and benefit. We cannot achieve that when the peer is the model and the person with autism has to learn from them. And so we may inflate skills for the peer, and we're deflating or discounting the skill set that the learner with autism has. And then we talk about how we need to develop autonomy. Autonomy starts actually there. So I'll keep going. And please ask questions, and I encourage you to. And comment. So what's the purpose of social skills interventions and what is our outcome? Why do we do this type of work and what are we trying to gain? And I asked a couple people like, what's the outcome of your social skills intervention? And one BCBA said, it's whatever the kid can articulate. If they want to make friends, then we'll focus on that. If they want to make if they want to learn how to understand idioms and jokes, we can focus on that. And I'm not sure if we ask neurotypical kids what they want to focus on in that way, and they should have the ability to articulate it. So if you ask my 11-year-old what he wanted to gain from baseball, he's not going to tell you, I want to increase my batting average. I want to have better accuracy when I hit the bat to the ball. He's saying, I just want to play baseball and be good at it. If he says that, and he has language. And so when we ask people, if the criteria is the ability to have the language to say what I want from an intervention or an outcome, that may serve an audience of saying, I want to have a learner and family focused intervention. My goals are shaped on what the family and the learner want to work on. But what if they don't know what they want to work on? What if they don't know what they should be attaining? Then we've used talent, time, and resources, and we are missing the mark of what we should be working on. So here is a snapshot, if you will, of the instructional needs and social skills development. So we have, sure, you need receptive knowledge and vocabulary, need some flexibility. You need to be able to tell a story. You do. You need to have some narrative language skills. And it doesn't mean, so for the learner who is single word tacting, who is single word that's labeling various nouns and verbs and adjectives. You also need to have some what we call prosody, what I call flavor. You need to have some of that when you are telling a story. And has anyone ever seen the storybook called Yo Yes? Have you ever seen that? Okay, I'll find a picture of it so you can have a cover. And it's the story of two boys who see each other and all they say is a single word, yo and yes. And the level of inflection implies so many different things throughout the story. And that really signals, gives you insight onto who needs to get social. So who is social skills intervention for? It is really for everyone, even the single word users. And I'll make sure I'll write a note and I'll make sure that I put a link to Yo Yes, because I think the story is now on YouTube. I'm dating myself because I used to have it on like a cassette tape or a CD and show it. So, but you also need to have pro-social behavior development. And so for learners who have more challenging behavior, that's something that we need to decelerate and accelerate pro-social behavior development. But also, there are some things that are not challenging behavior, but they do get in the way of the goodness of a social conversation or social network, if you will. And those things that we don't like to talk about enough, we don't talk about enough, we don't like to talk about, but nose picking is a thing. And so if I'm having a conversation with someone and I'm a kid and the other kid picks his nose a lot, then I'm not necessarily going to add that child to my social network, regardless of his language. And so these are things that, sometimes we're like, well, that's what he does. Well, he should probably reduce that, or she probably reduce that, because we do want to improve pro-social behavior development so that there is a mutuality of benefit, and so that learners can be seen as a potential or a viable social partner. So pro-social, so we're talking about those who have a diagnosis or not. Narrative language use is giving room to content and use, including cultural and linguistic diversity. And flexibility is like, how do we solve these problems? And so there's an example over the summer, had a social group, and these kids, I don't know why, I don't know how this happened, but I came in on the middle of this conversation. And someone decided that hate was a suitable word to use. And it was just a word. And why could we not just, not what it was, hate is not a good word, but it's not a curse word. That was the point. It's not a good word, but it's not a curse word. And then this kid, let's call him BJ, he goes on to say, it's a good word. It's not a good word, but it's not a curse word. So if I said, for example, then he turns to Jeffrey and he says, if I said, I hate you, that's not a curse word. So Jeffrey turns and he says, you hate me? How could you hate me? Why would you say that? Apologize now. And BJ says, apologize for what? I didn't say I hated you. I just said I was just using it as an example. And Jeffrey continues on. And Jeffrey decides, he says, you need to apologize to me right now. And if you don't, I'm going to hit you. And so BJ sits back in his chair very calmly. And he says, you're going to hit me because I didn't apologize to you? I'm not apologizing because I didn't do anything wrong. It was just an example. BJ screams and he says, and it's a poor example. Jeffrey says, and you're right. Jeffrey's going to be an attorney. Jeffrey says, and you're right. It is a poor example, but it was my example. Next time, I'll use a better example. But I'm not apologizing because I didn't do anything wrong. And so BJ then says, when someone says you need to apologize, you have to. I said, oh, no, actually, he doesn't. He doesn't want to, and we can't make him. You need to make, I said, we cannot make him apologize. He doesn't want to apologize, and we should all just move on. He says, I'm going to hit him. So for the rest of the day, we were blocking Jeffrey from hitting BJ because that became the focus. And where did it start? The lack of flexibility. Not everyone's going to apologize to you when you need an apology. How many apologies are you probably owed? And you're like, they didn't apologize to me, and I just have to make a decision as a human being to stay here or move on. But the rule made him stand out in such a way that it shifted the focus of not only the group that he was in for the morning, it changed the tone of the rest of the day in a way that we were now having a conversation with him about not hitting. You can't hit a person because they didn't do something that you wanted them to do. And so cognitive flexibility is part of that. And physical regulation too are part of the instructional needs if you talk about core skills that are needed for development of social skill development. And so there are some, sure, we have the 7 dimensions that says, you need to have some social significance and outcomes that need to be socially significant to the people who we picture or image or imagine who will benefit. And then there's a research article that says, what are we all doing this for? Research and practice need a bridge. And then there is a research article that says, operationalizing skills is important for the practitioner because it creates levels of clarity for the learner. And so where have we, when we can't do these things and when there is a challenge, it becomes the challenge for the learner. And so there is Greg Hanley, I think most people know about his work, but there's a research article that he talked about and said that that part of the challenge that our learners may have may not be because of them as much it is because of us. The preparation that we have, and not only our preparation, but our positionality towards what it is that we do. Who gets social skills intervention? Who should get, where, how are we framing our interventions and our positionality towards an intervention is linked to the tools that we get, the professional development that we get, and how we see a learner creates a space of what type of intervention that we give them. And most of us would say that's not true. I am ethically bound to provide the learner different types of to provide them the best of what they need to have. I am ethically bound, and bravo to us. But there are also people who create interventions based upon what they like. They choose interventions based upon what they like. They decide what a learner should have. And this has been well founded because we have these things called disproportionality in research, in clinical skills, and diagnoses, and in education, specifically special education. And so there's an article that says, I'm not trained for this. And it studied a group of individuals and special education teams inside of a school district. And they were all tasked to provide social skills intervention. And their barriers could be categorized in positionality, how they saw friendship, how they viewed friendship mattered in the design of the instruction, how they viewed equity inside of this inside of instruction, using peers and peers coming in and telling and providing SDs, if you will, to the person with the diagnosis. And so then it looks instructional where, go get the red ball. Good job getting the red ball. That's not how peers interact. And then it is about the personnel preparation. How do I choose my professional development activities? How prepared do I feel to teach social skills intervention? So instructionally, my scope of practice says that I should be able to do this. My training says I should and I should be able to do this. But my scope of comfort says I don't know if I'm actually comfortable with doing this type of work. And yet we're likely going to do it anyway because scope of comfort and scope of competence and scope of practice are probably going to outweigh my comfort in doing something. And so what will be the barrier to that learner is not necessarily the skill set of that learner, but who we are inside of that intervention and our preparedness for it. Let's see. So who does what? We know this. So educators, they have, their time is diluted. And they have the least training time when it comes to autism, for the most part. And but they have their time is diluted by services and all of the things that move and task them inside of a school day. SLPs are approved with less time to work with learners, so 30 minutes a week, 30 minutes. I don't even know how that works. 30 minutes a week, 60 minutes a week, 15 minutes a day, all of those things. And but we can work across multiple settings. We are well suited for individual or as a singular trade, if you will. We are SLPs are likely to be well suited to provide individual and or group therapy, but may not be as skilled if they are SLPs alone, may not be as skilled as much in supporting maladaptive behavior. But know the most, probably are the smartest people in the room when it comes to social language development and language development. But there may be an implementation challenge if a person has more social or maladaptive behaviors. People who are backgrounds who have in ABA, they're likely to have concentrated training and education in behavior change or behavior implementation procedures, but may be challenged in social skills intervention because of the nuances of it all. We can work across settings. We often lead intervention design. Our time is more concentrated with learners. However, we may be less adept to working beyond a singular person. So more individual-based, not necessarily group-based. Educators, more group-based, not necessarily individual-based. SLPs are nicely stacked in the middle. And that's why SLP BCBAs are really important, I think, to the workforce in terms of autism interventions. So we talked about the barriers in learner and social skill development as it relates to personnel preparation, equity, and positionality. But just to frame equity, and I feel like I'm running out of time. I'm going to skip ahead and frame equity a little bit. We've done this. I've talked about this. Relationships have a communal interest, peer selection, and how we want learners to be able to actualize, maintain, and there's a level of reciprocity in the relationship. But let's define equity. So equity is an observable act where there is statement contribution, if you will, and there is not an imbalance in communication. There's not an over communicator or an under communicator in one or more individuals. There is a space of balance in that conversation. And so think about I call it training people to provide to inquire, and some people call it conversation. And so, how are you doing? What's your name? What are you doing? What color is your shirt? Do you like to go on a vacation? Do you like to? And so all the question is imbalanced, because there is a person who is providing questions and there's a person who is answering. So it becomes a Q&A rather than statement to statement. And no matter how we feel about Dr. Gutstein and all of the things, there is a concept that came out of that they pulled from different areas called declarative language. And conversation is really, a good conversation is really statement to statement, not necessarily Q and A. Oftentimes my kids will go play with other people's children. And I'll come back and I'll say, what's that person, what's that little girl's name? And my daughter will say, I don't know. And I'll say, well, how old is she? I don't know. What school does she go to? I don't know. We can talk about that. So what did you talk about? And they talked about what they were doing. They talked about playing. They talked about building. They didn't ask each other those questions. But we often teach learners those questions as part of the conversation. And that's not what kids do. And this is not a test of who has children, who doesn't have children. This is not that. This is about, as practitioners, how are we framing intervention to make it more equitable? And one of the best things that we can do is have contact with the things that the learners in those age groups are contacting. Do we know Roblox? Do we know Minecraft? Do we know the one that they use in classrooms and teachers have now banned? It's a IM machine. It starts with a D. Do we know that tool? Do we know Bluey? Do we know what Bluey says? What about Caillou? Do we know the things that their potential partners watch? Do we know that bro, bruh, and brah are the same person? And do we know that at a certain age range, children may not call each other by their names? If they do, they may just talk to each other about what they need. And they may just start saying, oh, bro, what's up? The first time I saw my son give another boy like a dab, like you grab the hand and you go in and you say, I was stunned. Like, oh my gosh, he's only 6. Why is that happening so fast? But it gave me insight. So are we teaching the way, or are we teaching them to also nod? So creating intervention and the variances, just take the social greeting, creating intervention that gives a different space of how people greet is important. And remember, if we operationalize it, that will vary across contexts, people, and environments. So we have a student in our school right now who calls his teacher bro. She can't stand it. And she's like, I am not your bro. My name is Mrs. Robin. And he's like, okay, bro. And he says that after, because he needs to work on it, because the context of the classroom is that you can say bro to your friend next door, but not necessarily bro to your teacher. And, it's the function of his behavior, attention. Yep, sure is. And she's feeding right into it every time. But are we teaching them the different ways to say hello and to greet that are age appropriate? Are we teaching them to say, to ask another person, what's your name, when most people Most children get, that's an adult question. Adults want to know the name. Kids may not know the name or the school or the age. They only ask those questions really if something is fishy. How old are you anyway? Is the question. Not, hey, what's your name? It's usually, hey, you want to play? Or come on over here. Or can I play with you? What are you guys doing? And then the kids explain. And then he says, I want to play too. That's usually the greeting. It's not, hey, everybody, how are you? That's adult. And so when we think about equity and intervention, sure, it is the over or under balance of communication in one or more individuals, but it is also the horizontal position where one individual commands or directs another in the social interaction, and there is no observable mutuality. Friendship relationships, mutually beneficial, are horizontal. Oftentimes when we add peers to the mix, it becomes imbalanced. And the neurotypical peer is seen as the person who has the skills to model. They typically have skills that adults appreciate and not other kids. They are typically the people who are not appreciated on the playground, but appreciated as a teacher's helper in the classroom. They have no social currency. The people who have social currency are not necessarily who adults pick first. And so if I want my learner to be able to make it on the playground and be well suited and identified as saying, this person is a viable social partner, then Sophie, no direction to Sophie Million, who's on then Sophie may not be the peer I select, because Sophie may just be the model. She's a peer model. So Sophie, we're making Sophie a peer model. And what's the purpose of her in this group? To show them how to be. And who says Sophie has everything correct? So it's the horizontal relationship that benefits all those in the group. So the takeaway for the learner who is the model, is it always that the person with autism could be their potential friend? Are they at the end of that group? Is the person who is on our caseload, who signed up for services, are they getting invited to the party? Are they getting invited to hang out? Or do they have the skills to be invited to a dinner with adults? It's like teaching someone to play Uno. Do I teach you to play Uno, or do I teach you how to match the color, match the number, and I spend time on the game? Or do I teach you how to socially navigate, how to have fun in the game? Do I teach you how to smack a card down on the table? Because that's part of playing Uno. Do I teach you how to say draw two with some prosody, with some force? Draw two is not the same as take two or draw two. That's a different game. So do we want to teach them to play Uno with us? Or we want to teach them to play Uno and then be invited to the Uno game because authentic relationships have developed because they smack that card down on the table like no other? Or are they playing to win? Is Uno a transaction, or are we looking to build relationships? So intervention and equity and social skills are very much connected. And I'm not sure I know that we don't always think about these things, but it's important. And so we think about, our models of intervention. We have we have staff intervention, staff directed intervention. We have peer model intervention. We have caregiver intervention, right? And then we also have, inside of this, we have our code of ethics. The ASHA code says, take a course in DEI. The BACB is like, where's your CEU in this? You have all these CEUs that say, think about diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice. And then our outcomes are not shifted enough in terms of the actual intervention. And so this logic model really includes equity to implore us to think about, what is this all for? What are all these courses, this education, these different models of intervention? What's it all for if the outcome of our groups remain less than equitable inside of our intervention? Let's think about a couple of things. So when we rethink instruction, and I gave some examples of, of this. So asking for items for people to retrieve. I think that's like a typo. Asking people to retrieve items for us. Go get the red ball. Go give me the blue triangle so we can play. What's that plastic axe throw that's now at Costco, which I think is funny. It's fun. Go get that. And there's some value to this. We're not saying throw it all out. There's value to learning receptive language and comprehension. There's value in being able to say your name when it's asked. There's value to being able to sit at a table and systematically, sequentially play a game. However, most conversation that happens is not happening at the table. Most people are moving as they have conversation. When you play basketball, you are, even if you're not good at it, you can be in the mix. You're moving. That group is moving. They're not stationary. And so sometimes our groups are often seated, and there's merit to that. But their peers are outside in driveways, on steps, and they're moving from house to house to house. If they meet at the YMCA, they're moving from room to room to room. They're not staying in one place. So there's transitions abound. So if we're teaching social skills and we're working on social skills without any movement, is it equitable enough in preparing them to be seen as a viable social partner? And so vocal verbal participation, controlling what is said and how it is said, that's big. So in the world, we in the world of assent, we want to have assent, but oftentimes we may often police what children say, right? So we have a child that curses, right? And everyone's like, oh my God, he curses. And he curses quite well. Like, it's so appropriate. It's better than me. And but there are, there's more context to the story. But they were outside playing ball, and he's not the best person that can catch the ball. And so he catches the ball. He doesn't catch the ball, and the ball hits him, right? And he turns to the interventionist who was playing catch, and he says, "You asshole." And so the not the interventionist, the kid didn't catch the ball hits the kid. The kid turns to the adult, says, "You asshole." And the adult's like, you know, Landria, that felt personal. That right there, that felt personal. And I thought, yeah, it might have been a little bit, but if he had missed the ball and I had thrown it, he would have said the same thing. And so we may say, you tell him, cursing is a bad idea. It is a bad idea. Those curse words should not come out of a 5-year-old body. That's what I say to him. You're 5 years old. Those words should not come out of a 5-year-old body. He was like, all right, no cussing. That's what he says, no cussing. And so he knows that. And he says what he says, but the alternative that people would go through is like, let's teach you to be kind. So a person that curses is not necessarily unkind. They just have a verbal repertoire that is maybe more colorful than the next. And so we want to teach kindness, we want to teach turn taking, and those things will happen. But should he have said, you a-hole, or he could have said, darn it, that hit me in the face. Don't, watch yourself. That's what he could have said. And that would have been perfectly appropriate. Watch yourself. Watch yourself the next time you throw a ball at me, Mr. Alex. I'm not playing with you, Mr. Alex. I want to play catch, but don't throw the ball in my face. You know I can't catch well. Teach him the words. What if he never catches the ball well? Should he walk around calling people a-holes? Or should we give him better language that will be a good stimulus equivalence, that will be a good stimulus match to the spirit of what he was trying to convey? But we don't often do that. We say, you need to be kind, and say, ouch. Oh, fudge. I don't know if fudge is a good substitute. It's just not. And now people are teaching kids to say, other words like, oh, baby powder. It's like, no, I don't say baby powder. You want to be able, like, are you teaching, if that kid was neurotypical and that kid said, you a-hole, he probably would have gotten some trouble, but we would not have said to him, we would not put kindness as a goal in our groups. We just wouldn't.
Okay, thank you.
And so rethinking our how we teach kindness may not necessarily prepare them for advocacy and autonomy and sticking up for themselves and using all the words that are necessary to participate. And so kindness is nice. I feel comfortable around kind people, but I also want a person who can speak up for themselves, because they're going to need that more than anyone else. He's going to need it.
Landria, I'm just interrupting real quick to give a quick time check. It's a 5 here on the West Coast. We have another half hour with the Q&A, so if you want to go a little longer, I think that's totally fine, but wanted to check in.
Thank you. I'm on the last slide. So it works. Thank you. And so also rethinking instructional design, like, who are we involving in intervention? How are we selecting those peers? And I will end here with the remaking. It was a research article, and it was a big research study that included all of these different kids on their playgrounds, and the kids with autism selected the peers that they ranked the peers. In the social network, they ranked the peers that they like to play with the most. Those peers were not selected to be in the intervention. That's one. And so the peers that were selected, no matter how kids framed who they would want to be next to, their voices were not included in the actual peer selection of the study. So we think about, and I think about myself when I've done reverse mainstream, and I've included kids in our social groups. How did I select those children? The teacher selected the kids, I selected the kids, but I selected the person who initially, I selected the kids who were less likely they weren't the kids who got sent to the principal's office. They weren't the kids they were the helpers of the room. The girls who held the hands of the kids with disabilities or diagnoses down the hall. Those are the kids that were selected. Those children were seen as a model, but what we mention them in our interventions as a participant, but they really are there to show them what to do and what makes them good enough for that. And so when we frame it that way in terms of our instructional design of peer selection, we often don't necessarily inventory how the peer would benefit from the learner with the diagnoses. And so it's not creating the relationship, the friendship, or the potential for actualizing a friendship relationship when we create when we as adults create a criteria of what makes a peer a good model for intervention. And so I thought about, what's the takeaway here in terms of how do we infuse equity in our social skills intervention. We can infuse equity in how we rethink instructional design and peer selection, and including the skill and talent of learners, of who are on our caseloads, and what they bring to the table socially. We can rethink how our vocal verbal uh, uh, teaching and instruction, what it is that we are requiring, or how we are supporting them in vocally and verbally participating. And then concepts such as kindness and turn taking, how should we rethink and reframe those things? And also our instruction and teaching the ability to inquire and ask questions is not necessarily giving the repertoire of declarative language. And that's really what it's comprised of. And if there's not any other takeaway, ask yourself how much contact we have with what our learners are potentially contacting. Do we know what they know? Do we know what they could know? Do we know the language of their peer groups? And how are we bringing that inside of our social intervention circles to give them more social currency, if you will? And that is, those are about 4 ways that we can make social skills intervention more equitable. Thanks for participating and listening. Are there any questions?
I'm looking through the chat. There was a lot of chat going on. Did you have any questions, Tammy? I know that you and Lena were talking, and I've missed a few because I've been trying to monitor. If you're talking to, oh, there you go.
Like a huge area of interest for me, and like having run social groups for like 8 or 9 years, and like the kids taught me so many things that you're talking about here, about like, oh, if you want to play Uno, first they have to care about winning as well as caring about the peers that are there. Do they have a history of reinforcement with those kids? Do they care about those kids? They understand, all of the things you're talking about. So I find it really, really amazing. But one thing that you brought up that like I've been rethinking lately is like, I was assuming that the social skills that are valuable for their peers are also valuable for them. And as we're thinking more about like the social justice movement, like I sort of like, I guess I'm feeling a little, not stuck, but like cautious, much more cautious than I've ever felt before, about even assuming that the playground that I've tried to observe for every child, so I understand how people are joining at that age group with that group of peers, and how I can teach them to just comment on the person with the most athletic prowess, and then ask one of the people on the side if they can join. You know what I mean? Like doing that. I'm just wondering, because part of what I've always done is look at what are they trying to communicate, like a functional analysis of the problem behavior that they have with peers, and then teaching the replacements as the first thing, right? Because they already have MO for that. And I'm curious about how the social justice movement has like influenced your view on teaching of social skills.
I don't know if I've ever been a part of the movement in terms of social skill or social justice. I've just always operated from that frame because it's probably something that, so I don't know necessarily about the movement, because for me that says that so at some point we're going to move on, right? But I can also, I will likely say that as a core value, I think we all share this. You want people to have benefited from having known you, right? I think that's the core value. And what, I'm not sure I know how to answer the question in terms of the social justice movement. Do you mind reframing it a little bit, or?
Very simple level, like the
Yeah.
assumption is that we want to have equal like status in a relationship, equal reciprocity, as you were talking about. But maybe that's not a value. Maybe listening is a value. Maybe observing is a value for someone. And I was always working under the assumption that it should be like even, but then I was like typing in the chat, like, this is making me think so much. Like, I have friends who talk much less than I do, and I have friends that talk much more than I do. And I, I don't know, it's just making me think, and maybe this is too, maybe I'm just having like a point of exploration myself for all the work that I've done for social skills, but I was always trying to base it on motivation and how could I contrive the motivation for the social interaction and then layer the skills on top of that motivation and existing interaction. So I'm just like, it's just interesting and very thought-provoking, everything that you said, and I really, really enjoyed it. So I'm just gonna listen now.
No, okay, so now I get it. So it doesn't, this does not mean that we throw everything that we've ever known or done out. That's not what this, it's not what is being said. There's value in being a great listener. In fact, it makes you it makes the social engagement and the trusted leadership, if you will, it just makes it much better. So there's value in having a listener response repertoire and having the ability to comprehend, the ability to have vocabulary. But so I have, so like you, with your example, there are people that we know that talk a lot, people that we know talk less, and depending on the context, I could be any of those people. But what I do have is physical regulation. I do have the ability to be able to read a room, and I can gauge where I should enter or not. And more than anything else, I have autonomy of self to be able to articulate and advocate for me. And so those are skills that my profession did not teach me. The classrooms that I was in may or may not try to stifle that, but it's something that I myself have. And so oftentimes you have a diagnosis, and sometimes the diagnosis, takes up so much space in terms of intervention that we don't necessarily get to, this kid needs to learn how to speak up for himself. This kid is talking, and every time someone's talking, he's nodding his head to show that he is listening. Do you need to nod your head that much? And so we don't necessarily humanize what is just like, hey, you don't have to do that. Stop doing, we don't give that level of feedback. And so sometimes the lack of feedback makes them not a viable social partner, because if I am 11 and all he does is bob his head up and down the entire time I'm speaking, that's annoying to me. And so the peer may not feel the freedom to say, hey, Doug, you're annoying, because Doug has autism. So we don't tell Doug, that's annoying, Doug. And so we have not made Doug a viable social partner, because no one ever told him that doesn't work.
Or taught Doug to look for that feedback from his peer, and that subtle feedback means stop doing what you're doing, like reevaluate. To look to read the room, as you're saying, to have
read the room,
monitor people, monitor their responses, and interpret those. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, very important, very important. Brilliant.
Yeah, we need to tell Doug to stop bobbing his head so much. People don't do that, and sometimes it's least restrictive. It's just that stop picking your nose, don't bob your head, get some Kleenex, don't be gross in this conversation. That's not how you get, a potential partner. You like her, but she does not want to hold your hand because your hands are dirty. Like, you got to tell people.
Agreed.
Okay, go.
100%. Corey's got a question. He's been waiting patiently.
Hello. First of all, I just want to say I thought this talk was incredible, and I learned a lot. And I've been trying to get an opportunity to hear you speak, and I'm really grateful to this group for putting this together because I have not had that chance yet. So thank you, Landria, and thank you everyone who put it together. And I want to say two things. I promise I'll be quick, but just you said something, and I tossed it in the chat about this concept of like a secondary. I think of it as a secondary measure. We've got our objectives and our goals for social skills programming, right? Like, we'll initiate so many greetings, or we'll respond to so many bids for attention from a peer, whatever our typical goals are. But that kind of more global measure of how many parties are they invited to after their experience working with us, or how many times does someone on the playground come to that? I just think that's such a cool concept that we should embed more into programming and research. We're starting to see it in the problem behavior research. We're seeing papers that produce data on the number of restraints that were administered 15 days before intervention, 15 days after, 6 months after. And I think those types of more global measures are not only important in problem behavior, but also in social skills. So thank you for saying that and kind of inspiring some thoughts that that I now have. But my question is related to also something else you said about the 5-year-old who's a pretty good swearer, or kind of that example of that kid. And I think we've all probably worked with those kids who have a target on their back because they've got an autism diagnosis or a diagnosis of a developmental disability. So we get called in to consult in a school or a clinic or wherever you are. And it's like, there's the kid you're looking at. He's the problem kid. And we sit and we observe and we see, well, he's, yes, engaging in some problem behavior related to maybe poor social skills. But if I look around the classroom, he's not the only one, right? Like, everybody's engaging in some level of problem behavior. And more often than not, the kid with autism is engaging in less. I'm talking about social skills, really. They're just better at hiding it, or they're better at not getting caught. And so I've really tried to formulate questions or tried to design programming that teaches kids not to get caught. And that, and to me, is such a social skill, right? There are conditions under which you can swear and be like one of the kids on the playground, but knowing when it's okay and when it's not okay, and how to do it covertly under some conditions and overtly under others. And I'm just curious your perspective, or if you've had any success or thoughts on, you're working with a kid that's engaging in some maybe more advanced social skills like swearing, but they don't quite understand when and where to do it, so they're getting into trouble. And it's actually a good social skill for them to have. At the end of the day, it's got some merit to it, but they're the ones getting in trouble because they're not good at hiding it. And I don't know if I formulated that question well. I guess I want to teach kids to do the bad stuff like their friends, so they fit in with the group, but they don't get caught, so they're not also now have this target on their back. Is there any merit to that, or have you had any thoughts or success in that world?
I've never been able to articulate it that way. I love that. How to not get caught. I've never been able to say yes. And so, should you curse out loud or curse under your breath? Is that?
Yeah, kind of.
Is
or
that
like,
it? Yeah.
Yeah, or like the whole class is doing something that's kind of naughty, but then the teacher turns around, the only one still doing it is the autistic kid, and now he's getting sent out. It's that type of situation.
Yeah, it happens. It happens to I can find a couple scenarios where that happens, but I've never thought of it that way in words, but it sounds like a great paper.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
You should do it. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Okay. That's. I just think it would be cool to get if you've got thoughts or perspective on it. If you think of something later, please let me know, because I'd love to hear your thoughts more on that.
I will. Thank you.
There's a statement and a little question in the chat from Lilith. It says, I love the reconceptualization of the DB, 1, invited to the party, 2, peer-to-peer or peer-endorsed social currency, What does this look like with well-constructed goals that include behavior, condition, criterion, and would insurance approve? What are your thoughts?
There's so many layers there. So I can honestly see the when we think about family and parent-centered goals, what does the invite, if you will, would have to be, what is it called? Fleshed out a little bit more in terms of wording. But that could be a family goal. And we could, have a baseline, in the last 6 months, how many outings has your family participated in? And then make a goal for family participation for another to be able to participate in the community, and a party is in the community. So that is, how that could look. And so you can take baseline if it was, out of 5 parties in the last school year, how many were you invited to? Maybe 1 out of 5. And so, that is, and so then it also, I have a good friend, an old friend, who said that sometimes kids get invited to the party because of social currency of the family. I don't know, we talk about that enough, the social currency of the parents. And so it doesn't mean social currency in terms of how much the parents make. This is not economic. This is about, PTA in it, and also being involved in the classroom and the school and socializing amongst families. So none of my children's friends' parents know me. They don't. So if it were left up to me, they don't have any social currency because I don't want to talk. I just don't. But I do have a husband that people know. And so what does he do? He coaches different things in the community. So one of the best things that I think that a parent can do to improve the social currency of their kids, and this goes across the diagnoses, is the involvement of the parent. So he coaches football, flag football, and they know him. Coach Alfred, he sends texts to people, Happy Father's Day, Happy Mother's Day. And he picks up, he drops off, he does all these things. And meanwhile, I'm on the corner and I'm barely saying hello to anybody. Hi. I don't really want to talk. But he is the social person and he has the social currency. Without him, I don't know if we would be as people would identify us as a friendly group in terms of our family. So you got to have someone. So sometimes the social currency of the kid, especially of a child who has a diagnosis, is the work of the parent and the family. Like, how well are they socializing themselves inside of the classroom, inside of the community? Do they give the teacher gifts? I know people like, oh, they shouldn't, but those things go a long way. Like, do they so I'm not sure about, I think in terms of insurance, family goals, it could be couched inside of that. Fleshed out, absolutely. Can you have a measure? Yes. And you can have a pre and post criterion. Oftentimes you have to give a baseline anyway when you're doing a insurance-based report. I think any report needs a baseline. They could approve it depending on the wording. And then more than that, sometimes the social currency of that child is also aligned with the social currency of that family and the social network, if you will, of one or more people who are involved in that with that learner.
We have about 8 minutes. Are there any more questions for anybody? I got a text from somebody who says, I think Landria is my new favorite person.
Oh,
I have
well,
another question, if that's okay. I'm just curious what you said you're a doc student. Is your dissertation in this area of research? And if it is, would you mind sharing what you're studying?
I just finished, yes, it is in this area. I just finished a group on preparation for social skills intervention, behavior analysts and their preparation for social skills intervention that is equity facing. So we ask questions and scenarios about that, but my dissertation research is really an intervention-based study on teaching practitioners how to have how to develop conversation fluency with learners who have autism. Statement to statement I think it's a multiple baseline design, but that could change. So that could change. So I am in my 4th year, but my work is primarily in social skills intervention.
Very cool. Well, I look forward to reading it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Landria? We're keeping her here for the last 6 minutes because we just love her so much. No, I don't see any more questions, but just lots of wonderful. Thank you. It's amazing. You can do it. We believe in you. We love it. Can't wait to read it. Good feedback there, Andrea. Where can everybody find you on social media?
I do believe you can find me on LinkedIn. It's just my name. And then on Instagram, it's the same. And I post things it's not all clinical. I'm not committed to that. It's, you could see pictures of my kids. And me cooking or digging a hole in my backyard. So that's all I do. And I read sometimes too and write for this dissertation. But thank you all very much.
Thank you so much, Landry. This was so, so good.